As psychedelics go more mainstream, people are taking a closer look at both the business tactics of organizations offering psychedelic therapies and people's personal code of ethics and how that might impact conversations about the future of psychedelics. One of the initiatives that's been started to bring attention to this issue is Northstar. Today, I'll be talking to members of the team behind Northstar, Liana Gillooly, Kat Conoour, and Shirelle Nooble. Northstar describes itself as an ethical trade association for the psychedelic field, focused on bringing together the stakeholders in the psychedelic movement to generate a culture of responsibility, co-create a code of ethics, and collectively determine guiding principles for the commercialization of psychedelics. So glad to have you all here.
Great to be here.
Let's talk about the Northstar Pledge that people are invited to sign. Viewers, you can see this at northstar.guide/ethicspledge. There's a series of 7 pledges: study the tradition, build trust, focus on process, to name a few. How did you all come up with the language in these pledges? How has it been received? And what kind of support and what kind of criticism have you gotten about it?
What we're attempting to do is create a process to have community-wide agreements. And the pledge is the first format of what we hope to be a much larger conversation and opportunity with our community to create and generate these agreements. And so we did create the wording of the pledge, and then we took it out to over 100 different people, asking for feedback and input, having conversations around hopes and fears in terms of psychedelic commercialization, and arriving at what we consider to be a baselining for our community. And it's also the pledge is really oriented towards an individual's personal commitment to how they're showing up to this work in our field. And so it's really this first step of this process of creating a dialogue, opening up the conversation, and inviting the community in. And the response has been, on one hand, overwhelmingly positive throughout this entire process. It's been remarkable how the vast majority of people we speak with are really emphasize how important, critical, and timely this conversation and this effort is, and that there is a clear need to do this work. And that's one of the first questions we went to our community asking is, do you think this work is needed and necessary? Are we the appropriate stewards for this? And I really want to ensure that we're framing ourselves properly as facilitators of this dialogue and not the arbiters of ethics inside of our field. And so yeah, we've had on one hand really positive response, and on another hand, there's been a lot of confusion and misinterpretation when you talk about ethics and standard setting. That can drum up a lot of ideas for what that means. And I think some people have misinterpreted the pledge as something that has teeth or something that is enforceable, when in reality, the pledge is a tool for self-reflection and a conversation with oneself, and then an invitation to share publicly what being in integrity in our field means to individuals. So we've seen some feedback around that. And then always with this work and with our movement turned industry, there's a huge need to expand the voices that are being represented. And we've done some work in reaching out to marginalized communities to receive feedback and input, and we still have a lot more work cut out for us in that arena.
Great. I mean, my understanding is that this is all a precursor for more of an ethic guideline for businesses. And from your Northstar website, regarding future code of ethics, Northstar will form a working group to evaluate the feasibility and define the requirements to create accountability around ethics at the organizational level. Signatories will be invited to contribute to the development of criteria and metrics to measure an organization's adherence to ethics. So the question is, what is the Northstar plan to come up with that proposed set of guidelines for individuals and organizations and businesses in the space? And a little bit of hardball, what criteria makes Northstar the right group to propose these standards? And lastly, how do you guys plan on holding yourselves accountable to it?
I think that those are excellent questions. I mean, when we think about our work, we are really coming into this next stage of understanding feasibility. And so the first stage was really to co-create a starting point for the discussion and put something out for individuals. And what we think that this work will do is really help shape organizational culture. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to be able to lay out a very clear plan in terms of what a certification would look like, what a standard setting board would look like, how do you build in the governance structures. So this is where we're sitting, and part of what we hope to do with the community and through discussions and town halls is find other people who are passionate about this work and have expertise to offer. And we really see ourselves as being facilitators of this, bringing people together, and then creating a plan from that point. And in terms of holding ourselves accountable, this really comes down to the pledge itself. And so the principles that are laid out in the pledge are a starting point for holding oneself accountable. And one of the pieces of the pledge that really resonates with me personally, and again, this is a personal invitation for people to think about this, is how do you build trust within community and also seek advice from mentors and guides. And so moving at the speed of trust is a really, really critically important piece of doing this work. And so in our current phase right now, moving at the speed of trust means listening. It means inviting in dialogue. And so that's one of the ways that we're holding ourselves accountable.
One more hardball question. Where does your guys' investment funds come from? And how are you free to act in accordance with your ethics in relation to that?
Yeah, so just to be clear, Northstar is a fiscally sponsored by MAPS and is filing paperwork to be a nonprofit. So there's no investment opportunity within the group. So I think the question is, where do your philanthropic dollars come from? And Northstar has been primarily funded by its founding team members. And we've also received funds, I think, from 2 other donors as well. One of the ways that Northstar can remain in integrity is through transparency. And so we intend to publish and open our books to everyone, and are building out that module on our website. Eventually, I mean, we're not quite there yet. This is a really small nascent organization, and primarily, I mean, the 3 women you're talking to right now are unpaid. And so we've done this all as volunteers to this project and to this mission and effort. And we've raised a very small amount of funds to do things like get the website going.
The total amount so far has been about $70,000. And, through our fiscal sponsorship, it's a project that's supported by Oren Project, and Oren Fund, which is a donor advised fund that I run, has given seed funding to this project, and I think the most large amount so far.
You've already spoken to 100 stakeholders, and at the same time, there's roughly somewhere around 100 for-profit and nonprofit businesses in the space. Have you guys been reaching out to them, and what metrics have you proposed to them? How have these conversations gone?
When you're building relationships and moving at the speed of trust, the primary questions that we've been going to our stakeholders with are, what are your hopes and fears? And how would you define ethics, and what's important to you, and what are your concerns, and what do you value, and what do you think we can amplify as a culture that to deliver these medicines, or what is the cultural delivery mechanism that we want to amplify together as these medicines become available in our society? And so there are some we don't have to reinvent the wheel either. There's some really great examples of ethical and standard settings bodies in other industries.
How do you stop the big businesses that are already actively doing things that may conflict with ethical guidelines?
Northstar is not here to stop what's already happening. I personally hold the belief that business as usual is going to happen regardless of what any of us try to do, that the corporate interests are going to come into the field and seek to maximize profits. And I don't believe that there's any single effort that anyone can do to stop that reality from happening. What we are proposing is that if we don't band together and create this positive peer pressure and create a critical mass of value holders in our field to define for ourselves an alternative pathway forward beyond business as usual, then business as usual will be the only delivery mechanism of psychedelics into the world. And so we're really more interested in defining what that alternative path will be and creating a container to work together on making that a reality.
Northstar is in a place right now where we have to evaluate and clarify which strategy we want to take, and both are needed. And the first strategy is around soft power, around education, enculturation, positive peer pressure, having people buy in and learn through the process of growing and be inspired to be better, do better, and grow. And the other side of calling people out, setting standards, drawing hard lines, using hard power to move us the direction we want to go. And there's incredible power strategically and a need for both, but you can't do both at the same time. They make each other null and void.
Ladies of Northstar, thank you guys so much for joining us. It's been a true pleasure.
Thanks so much
for having us.